want to greet two people who are here from very far
Please.
distances. Cantor Ilana
Okay.
Wolpert, my sister, is logged on from Sacramento, California.
Oh,
Well,
wow.
hello, sister. Hello.
Welcome.
And Ilana, there's Stacy. She feels like she knows you already because
Uh,
talk about you. And my friend Allison
well,
Brenner is logged on from Cleveland, Ohio.
oh, let's hear it for the Buckeye State.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, I've got to hand it to Stav because when he reached out and wanted to do this program, I said, I cannot wait. This is wonderful and so important. And will you handle the tech? And when Stav said yes, I said, you need to call Alan and BB and demand a raise because the whole tech stuff, I don't like it. So I'm just so grateful to Stav and Rachel who are making this happen because otherwise it's like, you know, dun, 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 dun. It's very difficult to do it all.
With you saying that, I think we're ready to start and everything is set and we're live on Facebook and
Wonderful.
I'm recording this as well. So
Great.
I'm very happy to be here and to welcome you to this very, very interesting program. I actually posted a few hours ago on my personal Instagram page the ad that we made, and I wrote, this is probably the most meaningful moment of my shlichut so far. So for the last 5 months, I've been here in Jacksonville, bringing Israeli education and Israeli programs. This is the first time I do an educational program about the Holocaust, and I'm very, very excited to be a part of this. So I want to welcome everyone. We have here people from the Northeast Florida Jewish community. We have here people from Life Online group, which is a group of Jews from all over the United States, all communities, little communities all over the States. We have here another Shlicha as well. And we have here our speakers that Stacy will present soon. But I want to present to you Stacy Goldring, who is an amazing person. And she asked me not to talk a lot about her, so I will not. But she is a writer, she's a producer. She has an amazing organization, nonprofit organization called Searching for Identity that brings Holocaust education to everyone. So Stacy, thanks for being here and thanks for hosting this event with me. And the stage is yours.
Wonderful. Thank you, Stav. And I want to welcome so many familiar faces. I have wonderful board members here this evening and members of my writing workshop and friends and family and hopefully friends I've yet to meet. So I want to thank you so much for taking the time to come this evening for this very, very special, meaningful time that we will spend together. You know, this UN International Holocaust Day of January 27th, recognizing the liberation of Auschwitz, I have to be honest, this is kind of new for me. This is not Yom HaShoah, a day we traditionally recognize with commemoration, candles, Zikaron B'Tselon, and telling of stories. So how do you approach this acknowledgement? Well, for me, it is about the words. This United Nations Day is an opportunity to learn about Holocaust survivorship identity through a national lens. So naturally, for us, the lens is Israel. And this, Israel, is what brings us together here this evening. Tonight, we have an opportunity to hear from Naomi Chase and Louis Post. Both Naomi and Louis's parents survived the murderous destruction of the Nazis, finding refuge in Israel. I know some of you with us tonight have a similar story, and it is an important one. What is that journey? What role does Israel play in their identity as children of survivors? And what does this day mean to them? We'll hear from both Naomi and Louis, go into dialogue, taking your questions. Naomi Chase is a native of Cleveland, Ohio. She is a professional Jewish educator who has created and implementing award-winning Jewish educational programming for diverse learning communities, including K through 12 families, interfaith, and intergenerational for both religious and secular educational settings all around the US. And she is also a freelance cantorial soloist. Studying locally and abroad, Naomi earned a bachelor's in journalism and Middle Eastern studies and a master's in education and Jewish studies, holding an international Holocaust educator's certificate from Yad Vashem and teaching certification in ESOL, English as a second language. Here in Jacksonville, Florida, our public library system is fortunate to have Naomi as its system-wide volunteer coordinator of adult learning. A published writer, Naomi's work can be found in various newspapers, magazines, and soon a Searching for Identity book. Naomi has 2 sons and daughter-in-laws and 3 children. So we welcome these 3rd and 4th gens, Ben, Tiffany, Chase, Ari, who reside in Columbus, Ohio, Evan, Brianna, and Major, who reside in Cleveland. Louis was born in Krakow, Poland, 3 years after the end of World War II. In 1957, a change in the communist regime in Poland produced an opportunity for Jews to emigrate to Israel. Because Louis's mother was a Zionist, to Tel Aviv they went. In 1962, Louis's father persuaded his mother to move to the US, where he felt he could be more successful in business. Their new home, Buffalo, New York. Louis went to school in Buffalo, received his PhD in clinical psychology from Columbia, did post-grad work at Yale, and that's where he met his wife, Claire, who's here this evening. The post settled in Lansing, Michigan, Louis serving on the clinical faculty of the Michigan State University Department of Psychiatry, serving as chief of psychology of the university's psychiatric inpatient teaching unit. Following this, he entered private practice, co-founded and managed a large Michigan-based regional healthcare company. For his retirement, Louis served as president of the Michigan Psychological Association, and today he continues to spearhead advocacy efforts with health insurers regarding issues of access to and quality of mental health services. And he also serves on a number of boards of community organizations. He and Claire travel extensively throughout the world when not at their home in St. Augustine or second home on a remote island in the middle of Lake Michigan. Louis has 2 sons, Michael and David, a daughter-in-law, Allison, and a grandson, Jonah, 3rd and 4th gen, all currently residing in Denver, Colorado. We welcome them this evening. Both Louis and Naomi are members of the Searching for Identity Writing and Discussion Workshop. That makes me choke up, I'm sorry. Contributing insightful, important experiences dedicated to recording and sharing the experiences of children and grandchildren of Holocaust survivors. Both are wonderful writers doing important work for us tonight and for the future, for no one to deny. We will hear from Naomi, followed by Louis. Naomi?
Tonight we commemorate International Holocaust Remembrance, which marks the liberation of the concentration camps Auschwitz and Birkenau on January 27th, 1945. Coincidentally, tonight is also Tu B'Shvat, a Jewish holiday of Hebrew biblical origin, whose name is its date, literally the 15th day of the Hebrew month of Shvat. In ancient times, it was considered one of 4 New Year celebrations, this one the birthday of the trees. Like so many other Jewish celebrations, Tu B'Shvat has acquired new meanings over time. The coincidence of International Holocaust Remembrance Day and Tu B'Shvat tonight is allegorical for me. As a Holocaust survivor's child, my family did not celebrate or observe January 27th as the Day of Remembrance. We observed Yom HaShoah v'Hagvura. Too many people don't know that what these words really mean. Day of Holocaust Remembrance and Heroism. Its date on the Hebrew calendar corresponds to the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising in April. To my father, a Holocaust survivor from Poland who eventually reached Palestine, the image of Holocaust survival was an Israeli riding a tractor with a gun slung over his shoulder. To me, a survivor is something that continues to grow, like a tree. So the coincidence of Tu B'Shvat and International Holocaust Remembrance is symbolically very highly charged. The debate over when to observe Holocaust commemoration has been heated among Jews. Some argue that remembering the Holocaust in the spring makes it compete with Passover, the holiday when Jews celebrate their ancient exodus from Egyptian slavery. Others have argued, I think logically, that this is precisely why it should happen then. Holocaust commemoration celebrates Jews who, like our ancestors in Egypt, were willing to risk their lives for freedom from their oppressors. Others worried that placing Holocaust remembrance any later in the season would eclipse Israel's Independence Day in May, and this might conflate the establishment of the modern Jewish state with the catastrophic events that preceded it. It's problematic to think that the tragedy of the Holocaust made the establishment of the State of Israel possible. My father took particular umbrage with that idea. To him, Israel was the promised land of the Jewish people. Many World War II refugees had always intended to get there, to plant it, and to reap what their own hands sowed. They wanted to be Israel's continuing Jewish story of survival and strength. They would owe no posthumous thanks to Hitler. Like so many survivors' children, I feel I owe it to my father to honor his experience and to share his perspective on Holocaust remembrance. Most days I do, but I am an American. I believe Holocaust remembrance is an internationally human obligation. It did not only happen to Jews, though it disproportionately impacted and diminished them. I want the world to know it was no hoax, that it could happen again. And I want everyone to feel the responsibility I feel for preventing that. My father was conscripted into the Polish army in 1938 as an 18-year-old. Though he wore his country's uniform, he was suspected, questioned, and mistreated. Finally, he and other Jewish soldiers chose to abandon the land of their birth. They made their way on foot through forests and deserts and even as stowaways on ships. My father arrived in Palestine in 1944. He fought in her War of Independence in 1948. He stayed until 1954, searching for survivors of his family, none of whom he ever found. I do not know where my father was from 1938 to 1944. And you know what stuff you, now you're sharing your screen and I can't see my words. Okay. I am named for his sister, the last one of 10 siblings he saw alive. Only a circuitous, serendipitous event in Israel gave him a reason to leave it. He lived on Kibbutz Yam HaMelech when a Federation mission from Cleveland, Ohio, visited there in 1953. My father recognized the name of the city, Cleveland, from letters he'd heard his mother read that were written by her sister, who had gone to America years before the war. My father asked one of the Clevelanders if he knew his aunt's husband, Koifke Ross. He did, and with that, my father's immigration to America was arranged. My father met my American mother soon after his arrival in Cleveland. They married in 1955, and my older sister was born on Tu B'Shvat in 1956. They named her Ilana, which means tree. My twin sister and I were born 2 years later in the month of March. Our birth date coincided with the Jewish holiday of Purim. It commemorates yet another Jewish revolt against an oppressor, this one in Persia. Despite my parents' advanced age, my father wanted children. He had no photographs, no diaries, and no documents to prove his past. He could not tell us about his childhood, but for snippets of memories that reduced him to tears. We hardly ever interacted with the husband of my father's aunt, and we never knew why not. The missing pages of my father's story are white flags of surrender I want to extend to other survivors' children, but we never stop wanting to make our parents proud and to make blessings of their memories. Though my father forsook religious practice, he and my mother wanted my sisters and me to know Hebrew and to visit Israel. I have been there 9 times, always to learn, never as a tourist. On my first visit, I met an Israeli teen who, upon hearing I was from Ohio, said, "Oh, they kill college students there, don't they?" That's when I resolved to make sure Americans would always know more about Israel than they could learn from headlines of its darkest hours. Today, my father's daughters all speak fluent Hebrew. My sister and I were Jewish educators most of our professional lives. My older sister is an invested cantor. Tragically, my father did not live to see his 6 grandchildren or his 5 great-grandchildren. Despite every external challenge he overcame, he died of a disease that overcame him from within. My oldest son's Hebrew name memorializes my father. His firstborn has my father's eyes. His second son is named for my father. This may be all the proof there is that my father endures still. It was our mother who told us all our lives, "You are the proof that Hitler failed." Jewish holidays are calibrated according to the lunar calendar so as to keep them true to their agricultural season in Israel. In Cleveland, Ohio, my family would sometimes celebrate Tu B'Shvat and Purim and our birthdays as the maple trees were newly flowering. Some years, however, they would occur during snowstorms. Tonight, the birthday of the trees and Holocaust remembrance are the dendrochronology that measure time, as well as the cataclysmic catastrophes that we count on trees, tree rings, to record. It is allegorical that I am here to tell my father's story tonight. Lately, my country of birth struggles to be a democracy for all. Images of hate and racial violence and political instability collide and fill my field of vision. For me, every day is Holocaust Remembrance Day. To all those who perished, I say, Zichronam Livracha, may their memories be blessings. And Am Yisrael Chai, long live Israel. May she be a light to all nations that seek peace. And to the world I say, never again.
Thank you, Naomi. If you have any questions that you would like to ask Naomi, the chat is available to type that in. It's very difficult for the second gen to do what they do. They are incredibly resilient, strong individuals. With that in mind, I turn it over to Louis. Go ahead and unmute.
Hello, my name is Louis Post. Thank you so much for being here today. I appreciate all of you being here. While these stories are difficult to tell, I know they're also difficult to listen to. My parents, Jacob and Anna, did not talk about what the Nazi extermination of the Jews took from them. They tried extremely hard to keep their awful losses at a bearable emotional distance. Their losses were of a magnitude that simply to speak of them threatened to overwhelm. So it falls to me to speak to you of what was lost and to remember what took place. In my parents' case, what was lost to the Nazi genocide were 2 large, sprawling, vibrant families engaged in going to school, dating, getting married, having children, figuring out how to support themselves, just going about their lives. And nothing that all of us today would not easily recognize and easily relate to. But the lives of my parents' families ended not through illness or accidents or old age or war. Their lives ended in mid-stride because my family members became the objects of murderous hatred. They were murdered, like my father's brother David, by being shot, like my mother's parents Leib and Rivka, by being gunned down in the square of their hometown. Some family members were murdered by being starved to death, some by being worked to death, beat to death, or gassed in the gas chambers. Some, like my mother's 29-year-old brother Wolf and his wife Mala, died by their own hand so as not to fall into the hands of the SS. Before they killed themselves, I don't think so. Stop. Wrong photo. Thank you. Before they killed themselves, they left their infant child in the steps of a nearby church. No one was spared what the Nazis did to the Jews. No one. In 1939, when World War II broke out, the total number of my parents' immediate family members, including spouses and children, was approximately 30 people. 6 years later, in 1945, when World War II ended, 3 individuals were alive out of those 30 from my parents' 2 families. My father was the only surviving member of his entire immediate family. My mother and her youngest brother were the only survivors from their immediate family. The culture and the communities from which my parents came were erased from the face of the earth. This is what has been lost to the Nazi genocide. My parents were each the youngest of 6 siblings. Their respective parents owned small businesses and resided in small towns in Poland, not far from the city of Krakow, the commercial and cultural center of the area, then and now. Until 1942, my mother lived with her parents and members of her extended family. Their homes, actually, and all their possessions had been confiscated by the Germans and turned over to Christians in the community. So the family lived in extremely cramped and close quarters. They were often cold and often hungry. Yet my mother to this day recalls those times as happy for her because they were still all together. One day in the fall of 1942, that all changed. All the Jewish inhabitants of the town were collected, marched to the town square, and shot. My mother survived because she was away. She subsequently found her way to Krakow, where she obtained false papers identifying herself as a Catholic. She was working in Krakow when she was stopped for a random identity check. Because she did not believe that her papers would pass inspection, my mother ate them while she waited in line to be interrogated. And because she could not confirm her identity, she was sent to Auschwitz. Crucially, she was sent there as a Catholic, not as a Jew. If you went to Auschwitz as a Jew, your average lifespan was 6 weeks from your date of arrival. My mother recalls Auschwitz as a living hell. This is my mother at 19. She recalls seeing infants' heads being smashed by Nazi camp guards into walls. She recalls Mengele, the Nazi physician war criminal, making selection as to who would be slated to the gas chambers. She recalls witnessing Mengele's brutal experiments on inmates. She remembers waking up in the morning to find next to her the corpses of women who died during the night. She spoke to me of seeing inmates walk onto electrified fences surrounding the camp as a way of ending their suffering. She spoke of living in a place in which the sun could be hidden by the smoke from the crematoria where the bodies of gassed Jews were being burnt, of spending her time in a place where she could smell the peculiar odor of that smoke. She remembers looking at the sun and wondering if there was still a world out there, wondering if there were any Jews left in the world. My mother survived 3 years in Auschwitz because she worked in the camp's kitchens. She stole food for herself and for other inmates. If she had been caught, the penalty for these acts was death. When the war ended, my mother was in Germany. She immediately made her way back to Poland in the hope of locating members of her family. Until 1942, my father resided with his family in his hometown, where he was doing forced labor. In 1942, all the surviving Jews in his town were deported. My father was sent to a slave labor camp outside of Krakow. While conditions in this camp were brutal, it was not an extermination camp. In a manner that I do not understand, my father soon succeeded in having himself transferred from the slave labor camp to Oskar Schindler's enamel works factory in Krakow. This factory, Schindler was a German, came to fame as a result of the movie Schindler's List. All the workers in Schindler's factory were Jews. Schindler kept them out of the clutches of the SS by a liberal distribution of bribes. The factory provided workers with housing and with food. My father thus lived in a world far different from that of my mother, who was only 46 miles away in Auschwitz. That protected world ended for my father in 1944. Schindler was unable to any longer protect his workers in Krakow and decided to move it to Czechoslovakia. My father did not make the list to move with Schindler. Consequently, he was deported to the Mauthausen concentration camp in Austria. At Mauthausen, inmates were compelled to climb hundreds of steps to reach the top of a stone quarry. The SS made a sport of throwing inmates to their deaths from the top of this quarry. My father told me that he believed that he would not survive there for very long. Again, he bribed someone to have himself transferred to the Ebensee slave work camp, also in Austria. In Ebensee, inmates were provided to German companies for slave labor, companies, many of whom are still in business. It was here that my father was liberated by the American Army in 1945. He too made his way back to Poland in the hope of reuniting with his family. My parents met in Krakow in 1945. They were married in 1946. I was born 2 years later. My sister followed. My father passed away in 1998. My mother is now 98 years old. She still carries on her body the number 32,127 tattooed on her forearm in Auschwitz. I should tell you that I'm not talking with you today because I need to tell you my parents' story. I'm glad to tell it and believe that it's a part of history which should be known. But really, that is not the main reason for my speaking with you today. The reason I've decided to tell my parents' story is because I repeatedly feel afraid that what happened in Germany can happen again. Not in the same way, and not necessarily to Jews, but to some group of people whom a government chooses to dehumanize. And the first necessary step to enabling brutality and genocide toward a group of people is to dehumanize them. And it's easy to dehumanize those whose values, whose appearance, whose way of life or beliefs we disapprove of. once you dehumanize a group of people, it's easy to believe that the country and the world would be so much better if they were all gone. And this is what I hope that you all learn to recognize, to guard against, to challenge, and to confront. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Louis. Thank you, Naomi. I'd like to begin our dialogue, and I would love for anyone to, like I said, submit any questions. But first of all, I want to thank you so much for sharing the stories that you did and for everything you do. And you're both here this evening because your parents came to the United States through Israel or Palestine at the time. So I would like you to address that journey, how they got, from A to B, and what you think that this day means to them. Louis.
Well, the journey to Israel from Poland and to the United States was frankly one parent giving way to another at different times in their relationship, something with everyone who is married or has been married will recognize. So the first marriage was they both wanted to get out of Poland. They did not want to have their children grow up under communism. We left in 1957. My mother told me there were stories that the Russians were going to come in, people were going to be sent to Siberia. Remember, they got out of the camps in 1945. And any story like that terrified them. So they just wanted to get out. And my mother was an ardent Zionist from before the war, and they went to Israel. My father was an ardent businessman, and he had a business failing, a couple of business failing. And he said, we're going to the United States. My mother said yes. The day before we're slated to depart, she said, why don't you go ahead? Well, I'll join you with the kids eventually. Well, he stayed home, but eventually they came here to the United States. I don't know what this day would mean to my parents. So the only way I can answer is to say what it means to me, if that's okay.
Okay, please.
I think that while Jews have to be responsible for reminding the world of what happened during the Holocaust, it's not Jews who have to be reminded what happened during the Holocaust. It's the rest of the world that has to be reminded.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think of this day as bearing witness, all of you, myself, people who attend events like this, to what has happened and what the implication is for the present and for the future. And for me, it's terribly important that the non-Jewish world is involved. And the international part is that.
Don't you think it's interesting? Don't you think it's interesting that it falls upon us to tell the world?
I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No, I interrupted you, but I'm just saying, don't you think it's interesting that it falls on the Jews to say we must remember this? It's not humanity saying, I'm just being that you're someone with a psychology background. I don't know, I just find that interesting.
Well, I want Naomi to have space, but perhaps you don't escape your family heritage, but perhaps I just think it's going to have to be the Jews who remind the world of this.
Okay. Naomi, would you like to add something?
So because I don't know how my father got from Poland to Palestine, I mean, it was very, very hard for him to tell his stories. He told our mother, and he told some other members of her family, but we got it in bits and pieces. I surmise that he traveled largely on foot. I also conjecture that he always meant to go to Israel. So my assumption is that he was always Zionistically inclined and would have made Israel his home at any point. I don't think he meant to get there the way he did or without his family. I also don't think he would have left had it not been for that very serendipitous meeting of someone who knew that aunt who had gone to the States years before. He was very committed to our Jewish education, but not exclusively to our Jewish education. Education in general meant a great deal to him. Our mother, who was American, came from a family who was originally from Riga, and they were very Zionistic. So she always wanted us to go to Israel. So my mother and father were united on at least those two things. My mother's interest in our participating in synagogue life was she encouraged that and made that happen. He didn't stand in her way, but it wasn't his thing. When my sisters and I did excel in Hebrew and were active at synagogue and would participate in worship services he attended, and those were some of the only times we saw him cry. So it meant something to him. But Israel was very, very important. As I have shared with you many times, Stacy, the events of the last few years that have brought anti-Semitism to the forefront, not that it wasn't always there, but it has made it emerge in such obvious and frightening ways. I'm glad he didn't live to see that. I think it would have been extraordinarily difficult and disappointing for him to think that it's here, and that America isn't the haven it should be.
I want to touch on 2 points, Naomi.
Mhm.
You mentioned you don't know. And I think it's important for everyone who's listening to realize how much you don't know, how much these voids are a part of the children of Holocaust survivors' experience. Even before we started, my new friend Efrat was saying how she was just so happy that she found some documentation at Yad Vashem, something to fill in these voids. When we think about the effects of the Holocaust, we must think about the children and how these inherited effects affect their lives. Like Naomi said, every day is Holocaust Remembrance Day. It's this idea of trying to figure out this identity of who these people are. Naomi, you said it in a piece many years ago. You wrote that you're always looking at people's faces. You know, it was just so, I had no idea before I started this work that this is something that is part of the second gen. These are the effects of the Holocaust.
It happened twice, of course, at the Memorial Museum in Washington and at Yad Vashem, where you walk into these halls full of photographs and you're just sure that you look like them, you know, that one of them must be your relative. I've used Yad Vashem's database many, many times, but it is the dearth of information that I have that makes it so hard to access those databases. You know, you have to have information to enter into those fields. I know that I'm named for a sister of my father's whose name was Naomi. I know that his name was Silverstein, but there are hundreds of them. And, you know, I know the name of the city he's from, but that city went back and forth between Poland and Russia, and it doesn't exist now. The mystery that a family as large as his it was completely erased. It's unbearable to think that there is simply not a trace of anything. And it's made it all the more compelling, you know, to create a story, to be his story post-Holocaust. And I think it's remarkable that he wanted to live, that he wanted children. In one of the courses that I took at Yad Vashem when I got my certificate as a Holocaust educator, there was a professor who taught that for a lot of survivors for whom it's difficult, if not impossible, to tell their story, that eases once they have had grandchildren. That it's knowing that their children have had children that liberates them, frees them enough to feel as though they can begin to tell their story. And I just think it's the height of tragedy and cruelty that my father didn't live to see grandchildren or great grandchildren.
you also touched on this piece, Naomi, when you talked about Israel and how it came to be. So I want to put this out to both of you. And this is a common question. Would we have Israel today if it were not for the Shoah?
Well, that's a difficult question, of course. And I can't answer it, except historically. The Jews, the Zionists were a minority prior to World War II. They were mostly young adults who were not established in the community and who were able to displace themselves and go to a place that was seen as primitive and dangerous. So the young pioneers, and they ran the gamut from right wing to left wing. They had various names in various parties. I suspect it would have taken a long, long time, because simply look how difficult it was for people to displace themselves as the Nazis wound up the death machine and the trap that caught so many Jews and they could not escape. It is so hard when you establish, when you have a family, when you're working, when you're going to school. It is so impossibly difficult to decide to uproot yourself until it's too late. There were very prescient individuals who left. But if you look, most of the people who left, who came to the United States right before the war broke out, were young adults. There were very few families. Now, I'm not saying families didn't try to escape, please don't get me wrong. But to answer the question that you're asking, would Israel would have been established? I don't know, of course. I think it would have taken a much, much, much longer time, because it's a function of people. You have to have people to have a country.
Right. Right. Naomi, do you want to add anything to
that? Two things. I do think that Israel, the state of Israel, would have been established. I share my father's resentment at the suggestion that it would not have been established had it not been, again, because he interpreted that as giving the war posthumous credit. And there were a lot of refugees who ended up in Israel who never meant to go there. I mean, that was not their dream. They didn't have the Zionistic ideal. So we just have to be careful, of all of those attitudes. My parents did believe that there should be a Jewish state. I absolutely internalized that. And I do think, there's that piece of my dad's family when he came to Cleveland and he reconnected with that uncle. That man had 2 daughters, and those daughters had children with whom we had very little connection. But I think at one point, 2 of them reached out to us. And I think before it's too late, we need to figure out put all the pieces that all of us have, and at least try to make some coherent story out of what we all did know.
I know I know there are other people listening this evening who also have made that journey. Their family has made what I call a geographical signature. They've made their way to America through Israel. Do you feel any kinship? Is there any connection to people who have made that journey, who have gone? There's this ideology in Judaism to make Aliyah, to go up, and here it's kind of like we're not uploading, we're downloading. So I'm wondering if is there any kinship to that once you're in America, or that's
not my experience. I should tell you that my mother, as I mentioned, is 98, and she's got sort of mild to moderate Alzheimer's. I asked her when we last visited, Mom, do you regret leaving Israel? Totally. to this day, she thinks she made the biggest mistake of her life to agree to leave.
Really?
But in answer to your question, I don't think so. I don't think there is a kind of connection around that exists for me personally around other issues. It might be, so just a person, I can't answer this authoritatively. I'm not
No,
speaking
it's,
for
I'm
a
not looking,
group.
it's empirical. I'm
I-
not, I'm
I'm
asking
just for
Louis.
myself, no. For
Right.
myself, no. Other issues being Jewish, having been in Israel, but not around the emigration from Israel.
Okay, okay,
Mhm.
okay.
There was a time when I wanted to live there. My first husband was living there when I met him. When we met there. We ultimately decided to live in the States, but I don't think that I don't have the. Some people think that because there's an Israel, there will always be a place for us to go. In other words, should this happen again, that's what makes now different than the 1930s in Nazi Germany. There was no Israel, now there is. I believe, and I don't know because my father was so silent, but I believe that, here's what I'll tell you a story. My mother and father, when they bought their first home, it was in a neighborhood, it was on a block of a 4-block street. And the block that we lived on had a choice. We could go to an elementary and junior high school that was predominantly Jewish, or we could go to the other elementary and junior high school that were predominantly non-Jewish. And our mother chose to send us to the one where we would be drastically outnumbered. And when we asked her, other people asked her why she chose that, she said, I want my children to learn to be Jews in a non-Jewish world. And I think she was very wise. I think if I want the right to be a Jew anywhere, especially in a country that calls itself pluralistic and honors freedom of religion, I have to give that right to others. And I think that's what a democracy really is.
Okay, I want to segue just a little bit. What do you feel Israelis should know about how you, as a second gen, view Israel?
I pondered about this question. So all of you who are listening to this should know Stacy gave us these questions, so Naomi and I could think about them. And boy, that one stumped me. Probably, I suspect that Israel, I mean, well, those of you visited know that it's a vibrant democracy with differences of opinions about all sorts of stuff, important stuff, central stuff. There are vigorous debates. I think most of you know that. But because I live outside of Israel and I'm not part of those debates, my feeling about Israel is I simply am a very strong supporter of Israel, period. Without any of those complications, because I don't vote there. So I don't have to decide which candidate I'm voting for. I can't and won't speak for anyone who is a child of survivors, but I think that experience had probably made me an extremely, what's the word I'm looking for? Strong, engaged, determined supporter of the country of Israel. And that's probably not known because why should it be? That's probably not, it probably does not come through from most second generation, but I suspect that's a very normal response for most.
Okay.
And that's, so I won't say more, there's more, but I'll stop.
Naomi?
I agree with everything Louis said. I think Israel is a very vibrant democracy. It's very pluralistic. It definitely has its vigorous debates. I am uncomfortable with the power that the Orthodox parties have. I feel like as a woman, I would, not that there aren't women in Israel who live, freely and have careers. I just have those difficulties. I think it is as important that there be an Israel, as I think there needs to be understanding in America of Israel. And I have dedicated the major part of my career to helping educate Jewish Americans about Israel. I think there needs to be that relationship, not total agreement, and I don't think that America should presume to tell Israel what to do. I have lived there. It's very different to live there than to live outside of it and think about what it can do or should do or be better at. I think Israel has much to contribute to the world, and it's citizenship of the world that I think I want, that Jews should have. And if we want it and think we should have it, then we have to give it to others as well.
I'm going to bring Stav into the conversation, if you could unmute, because when Stav and I were prepping for this program, and I pitched the idea, Stav, do you remember what you said to me?
Yeah.
What'd you say?
If I think what you're saying is that I never heard a story before from a person that is that what you're talking about? Mm-hmm. Is I never heard the Holocaust story of someone coming to Israel and then leaving, because as a teenager in Israel, and also as I grew up, all the Holocaust stories I heard about were about people that either unfortunately died during the Holocaust, and that came from their from their children that were in the Holocaust, or about people that came from the Holocaust to Israel and stayed, because that's the people who I heard the stories from. And when Stacy told me that our speakers are going to be people that moved from the United States, from Israel to the United States, I was actually very interested to learn about it, because this is really something we don't talk about. The reasons for Holocaust survivors to leave Israel.
Now, I would never put anyone on the spot, or maybe I would, but I'm looking at these beautiful faces that I see on the screen, and I would love to introduce you to many members of the Jacksonville Jewish community who have made that journey. And I think as our shlichot, I hope I said that, I pronounced it properly.
You're muted, Stacy.
How's that?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know what happened there. I think that as our ambassador, our Gesher to Israel, I think it's something you could bring back to the folks at home and let them know that this population is here and they have a story to tell. And the stories that I've learned of second gen whose parents made that difficult choice to leave, and I'm looking at these faces and I know that those were difficult choices. They're really great stories. They're historical, they're personal. They represent the strength and resilience of who we are as Jews, people who survived the Holocaust. And I think there should be a film about it, but I'm just gonna leave it at that. I hope you don't mind, but I see Shoshana, and I know Shoshana's family came from, spend time in Israel. I'm looking at Janine. I know Sophia. These are just the people I have on my screen because I'm afraid if I touch the button, I'll screw something up, but I know there are several pages of people. So Stav, this is common. This is part of the fabric of who we are as the Jacksonville community. I think of Mora Ilana and Mora Liat at the center, these educators who have brought to our Jewish community this amazing sensibility as who we are in Jacksonville. And they came from Israel. their parents survived, their grandparents survived, and then they came here. So I charge you with telling that story, Stav. Giving you homework.
I know that this is something very, very important. I agree. And I promise that I didn't come here only to bring things from Israel to Jacksonville. I'll definitely bring back things.
Good.
And stories and.
Good. Well, I want to be timely because we're a very fortunate community. We have many events going on to commemorate this day. And so I want to give Louis a chance to kind of have a little post, Louis have a little post, and then go ahead and get ready for his next event that I hope you'll hop on over to JFCS so you can see their very important program. But before we wrap, I want to thank you for your time. This is not easy, but it is so important, and that you took the time this evening to be with us. You are inheriting these stories. You are making sure that this will never be denied. You are supporting the second gen and supporting their validity and who they are and their experiences. I want to thank Louis and Naomi for being with us this evening, and I hope that you will return soon to share your stories. Stav and I will be continuing this discussion for Yom HaShoah, and I want to just tell you a little bit about that, and then Stav is going to wrap for us. Searching for Identity has 3 programs coming up for Yom HaShoah. So I just want you to mark your calendars and be aware and know that Stav and I will be sitting down for a conversation called Holocaust Survivorship Through the Lens of Israel, where we're going to learn about how Israel views Holocaust survivors. And you'll be surprised to know it's not exactly how we American Jews see it. And that will be April 8th at 6:30 p.m. and that's a Thursday. And then I have a very special program. We're partnering with the Holocaust Education Resource Council in Tallahassee and the Florida Department of Education to bring you an incredible series. It's called Growing Up Loving Henry, and it is a programming series honoring the legacy of Holocaust survivor and philanthropist Henry Landworth. You will have access to screen the film Loving Henry, and then I'll be hosting a second gen panel discussion with all 3 of the Landworth children, Lisa, Gary, and Greg. It's April 11th. And then finally at the Kummer, I'm doing a program with Cindy Edelman as my literature series called Stolen Yet Found, where we will examine photographs and books rescued from the destruction of the Holocaust, featuring stories of photographs found in the Lodz ghetto. And it will be taken from this book here by the photographs of Heinrich Ross. And also the precious books that were saved and the precious books that were lost. We'll be doing a survey of that as well, focusing on Avraham Sutzkever. And if you don't know who Avraham is, he is the first survivor who stood up at the Nuremberg trials. He would not sit, even though they asked him to sit, to be witness to the crimes against humanity. And he stood there to represent every Jew and as an act of, or a metaphor for saying Kaddish. He stood to give his testimony. So he's a very special man. And so that's what we'll be focusing on. And that information comes from the book called The Book Thieves. That, of course, is, I would urge you to shop local here in town, San Marco Books and More. We'll order these books for you to have them available for the April 21st program. So fortunately, unfortunately, there are over 1 million ways to observe what happened at the we have 2 dates, January 27th this evening, that you have made time for, and we appreciate your presence. And then we hope to see you again for Yom HaShoah. Stop.
Have your mute.
Stav, you're mute. You're mute, Stav.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. To sign up, Leah, just go to info@searchingforidentity.org and shoot me an email. That's info@searchingforidentity.org, or you can instant message me on Facebook at Searching for Identity.
Thank you, Stacy. And really, this was an amazing opportunity for me to take part of. Coming here to Jacksonville to do what I do is already an incredible experience, but being a part of something this important is really meaningful for me. I just want to remind you that I keep doing Israeli programs. So I have some programs coming up. I have a program this Sunday about the elections coming up. I have some more programs if you're interested. You all signed up through my email, so please feel free to contact me to ask about more future programs. Also, some of our audience, as I said at the beginning, are not from the Jewish community here in Northeast Florida. Some of them are from Jewish communities all over the world. They're participating in this group called Life Online. And this is an amazing project that me and other shlichim do and bring Israeli programs to communities all over North America. So I'm sharing right now in the chat, if you want to keep getting more Israeli programs, fascinating Israeli programs, not only for me, but from Jewish communities around, you can join our group. And to finish, I want to say again, thank you to Naomi and Louis for speaking with us. This was a very, very interesting stories and a great experience to hear from you. And I look forward to hear from you again. And also, Stacy, thank you for doing this program with me. So I want to wish everyone have a great night, and with something happy Tu B'Shvat, because this is Erev Tu B'Shvat. And yeah, happy Tu B'Shvat and have a great evening.
Bye-bye.